Alright, I wanted to take a moment and talk a little bit about study skills. Not study skills generally, but studying for tests specifically. So let's talk about studying for tests. um, if you're watching this video, if you're watching this lecture through Canvas, then I've already asked you to watch this video here. So you've already seen that, and I want to comment a little bit on the video as well as add some more information to it. So the video had a lot of good information about general study skills, things like how to make a study schedule and things like that, and all of that's good information. It's good review, and so if you haven't done so yet, I really want you to watch the entire video. But there are two pieces of information that I want to focus and drill down on now, as specifically things that you should do to help you prepare for a test. The first thing is that you should make a cheat card, what he calls a cheat card in the video, but you may have referred to this as a cheat sheet in the past, or maybe a cram sheet, or a crib sheet, or a dump sheet, or whatever. There's tons of names for these things. But you need to make a cheat card, and then the second thing you need to do is quiz yourself. In other words, take practice tests. So I want to talk about each of those things. Okay, so cram sheets, or crib sheets, or whatever you want to call them. Okay, I'm not going to let you use a cheat sheet on the test, but the idea behind a cram sheet or a cheat sheet or whatever is that you should pretend that I am going to allow you to bring one page of notes, one page, one-sided sheet of notes. Okay, imagine that I allowed you to do that. What would you put on that sheet? Okay, so imagine that you are making this as an actual cheat sheet that I would allow you to use, which I'm not going to do, but just imagine that I did. What would you put on that cheat sheet? Okay, you have to fit it all onto one page. Okay, that's the key. Okay, and the reason that you want to do that is because that ends up being a really good study tool. Okay, it forces you. It's an active recall technique rather than passive review. So instead of just sitting there reading through your notes over and over and over again, you're actually trying to summarize things. Right? You're trying to actively recall things, because if you have to fit all of the notes onto one page, then you're not going to write down something that you already have in your memory, right? So it's a good active recall technique. It's going to help you to make connections between topics, because again, forcing yourself to fit all of the information onto one page means that you don't want to be redundant, you don't want to be repetitive, and so you're going to have to make connections between topics in order to get it done. Fitting it all onto one page and going through the process of trying to summarize all your notes means that you're gonna have to try to explain difficult concepts in a simple way, and so that's kind of like the Feynman technique that we've talked about before. It helps you to know what you know already. It helps you determine what you know and what you still need to memorize and understand. Okay, so making cram sheets is very important. And then finally, the obvious reason you want to make a cram sheet is that even if you're not going to be able to use it on the test, it will still give you a condensed page of notes that you can use to cram right before I hand out the test. Okay, you don't want all of your studying to be cramming, but it's not bad to cram if you've coupled that with long-term study as well. So making a cram sheet would be very, very useful to help you cram right before the test is handed out. Okay, so make a cram sheet. The other point was that you should take practice tests. Okay, now we'll actually take a practice test together in class, and that's good because one of the suggestions that he made in the video was that you should try to study a little bit in the actual environment where you're going to be taking the test. Well, we'll be taking a practice test together in class, and so that'll really help out. But then in addition to that, I'm going to post a second practice test on Canvas that you can use just for your own benefit. But to emphasize the importance of this and the reason that I put together these practice tests, so there's a second video that I'm not going to require you to watch, but I will post a link to this video in the Canvas assignment as well, so that you can watch it if you're interested. But here are a couple quotes that are very interesting from this video. So this is a a team of people who basically tried to figure out what are the best study techniques, what makes students successful. And so the presenter says, we found that IQ is not the #1 predictor of how a student will perform. In fact, we found 13 variables that were more effective at predicting academic performance than IQ alone, right? One of these factors we found to be multiple times more effective at predicting academic performance, and that was practice exams. We found that top students do more practice exams than anyone else. We found you can almost perfectly estimate a student's results based on the number of practice tests they had done. And we also found that you could almost perfectly rank a class first to last just based on how many practice tests they would do in a year. Okay, so this is the importance of doing practice tests. The thing though is that most students don't do this. Most students, when it comes time to prepare for a test, they just pull out their notes and they just read through their notes over and over and over again. And as we've talked about in the past, that is not a good study technique. That is just passive review, and that's not going to help you get the information into your memory. Tests aren't about what you remember; they're about how you use what you remember. Okay, so this is another quote from the video, and I think that's absolutely true, especially in a math class. Obviously, you do have to remember some things, but you also need to be able to take those concepts and use them to make an argument, or to analyze data in our case, right? Something like that. And so the point is that you have to practice putting the information into use, and a practice test will help you to do this. The other important thing about a practice test is that because the material on the test could come from anywhere in this unit, you need to practice. Your brain needs to have a chance to practice kind of switching back and forth between all of the various topics that we've covered so far in this course. So practice test is absolutely essential for these things. Alright, so make a cram sheet, make a practice test, or take a practice test. Now this is a cyclical process. I would say those two things, making a cram sheet and then taking a practice test, are probably the two most the two key ways that you're gonna be able to prepare successfully for a test. But it's a cyclical process, and what I mean by this is that you should start by making a cram sheet. Okay, you should try to get a cram sheet done before we take our practice test together in class, right? So start off by making a cram sheet, and then you should take a practice test. And then when you're done taking the practice test, you should go back and revise your cram sheet. Okay, because when you're done with the practice test, you'll probably have a little better idea of the things that you need and don't need to be on your cram sheet. And so you can go back and revise your cram sheet. When you're finished revising your cram sheet, then you should take another practice test, right? And then you should continue cycling through that process until you feel comfortable with the material. If you cycle through until you get to the point where, as the first presenter said in the first video that we watched, until the test is like an old friend to you, then I can guarantee that you'll do well on the test. Okay. So just to summarize, okay, here's how you should prepare for a test. Number one, stay up to date with your homework. Now if you haven't been staying up to date with your homework, then just keep this in mind for the second unit. Don't allow yourself to get behind in the homework. Okay, so that's the number one key. Keep the due date in mind. So I'll collect all of the homework from Unit 1 on the day of your practice test. Okay, and again, you can find a course schedule so that you know when the practice test is going to be on Canvas. Okay, so but stay up to date with your homework. Number 2 is make a cram sheet. Try to get your cram sheet together before you take your first practice test. Step 3, take a practice test. Now step 4, after you take the practice test, you should check your solutions on Canvas. I'm going to post solutions to these practice tests on Canvas so that you can check your work. And what I want you to do is go through your practice tests. Don't erase the things that you did wrong. Just scratch them out and using a different colored ink, make corrections to your practice test. Okay, using the solutions that I've posted. Make sure that you understand the correct solutions. Don't just copy them down. Make sure that you understand them. Okay, and if you don't understand them, Go to the math lab to ask for help. Come to me in my office hours to ask for help. Ask questions in class to get help on those things, but make sure that you understand the correct solutions. And then you should also, after you've taken this practice test, identify your weak areas. And I would suggest that you go back to homework problems and find homework problems that are similar to the problems that you did poorly on the practice test, and work out those problems from the homework. Okay, and then finally you're going to update your cram sheet. Okay, once you've gone through your practice test, made corrections, practiced your weak areas, then update your cram sheet. Okay, and then once you've done that, you should take another practice test. When you take your second practice test, it's not going to be in class, but try to simulate being in class. Try to simulate the real thing. Time yourself. Don't look at notes or anything else that you're not going to have while you're taking the real test, and so forth. Okay, and then you should just repeat steps 4 and 5 until you feel comfortable with the material. Okay, if you do that, I can guarantee a passing grade. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee an A on the test if you'll do that. So those are the tips that I have for preparing for a test. There are some other things that I want to talk about a little bit later about test anxiety and how to overcome test anxiety. But the biggest thing about test anxiety is that if you're prepared for the test, you're going to be less anxious when it comes time to take it. So make sure you prepare well. Happy studying, and I'll check in with you later.